Software-based Estonia, when a nation becomes cloud. Imagine this cynical scenario with me. You are a lost citizen in the 1990s, emerging fresh from beneath the collapse of a superpower that folded like a house of cards. You have a virtually worthless currency in your pocket, a crumbling Soviet bureaucratic infrastructure, and landline telephones dating back to the 1930s. The familiar pain for most post-Soviet nations would dictate going straight to the International Beginners Club, begging for loans, cloning outdated paper regulations from neighboring countries, and sitting down to weep over the ruins of the past. But this tiny patch of land on the Baltic coast, with a population barely reaching 1.3 million people, decided to play an entirely different game. They did not settle for building a traditional state with marble ministries and endless queues of citizens waiting for a stamp from a disgruntled bureaucrat. Instead, they decided to transform the very concept of a state from a geographical parcel defined by physical borders into a software code running on a cloud server. This story is not about a naive passion for technology or a teenage urge to ride hype waves. It is a cold, brutal story about the equation of survival. When you strip away illusions and realize that your geographic and demographic footprint makes you easy prey in any traditional military equation, rational thinking forces you to change the rules of the game entirely. Estonia did not create its astonishing digital miracle because it possessed Silicon Valley budgets, but because it was utterly broke. And when you are broke, absolute efficiency becomes your only mechanism to avoid extinction. In this deep analysis, we will not sing praises of smart apps. We will dissect how mathematical logic and rigorous scientific thinking can convert a vulnerable territory into the most resilient and efficient digital society on Earth, and how e-Estonia became the definitive benchmark for resource management and reducing human bureaucratic pain. Chapter 1. Birth from nothing and the first architecture of survival. To truly understand the magnitude of the rational decision made, we must rewind to August 20th, 1991. On that day, Estonia declared its independence from the collapsing Soviet Union. The initial data points on the table were catastrophic by every metric: a ruined economy, hyperinflation, and a state administration reliant entirely on tons of paper files stored in the basements of aging buildings. Had early Estonian leaders followed the conventional path and hired tens of thousands of clerks to build a modern paper bureaucracy, they would have instantly succumbed to the sunk cost fallacy, pouring resources into a failed analog infrastructure simply because humanity had used it for centuries. But the young leadership at the time, headed by 32-year-old Prime Minister Mart Laar in 1992, understood that mimicking the Western world using its old paper tools was merely a slow suicide. In 1996, the Estonian government launched the Tiger Leap Initiative, or T-XVT. This initiative was not merely a government project to distribute computers to schools. It was a systematic gathering of context data and a fundamental restructuring of society from its roots. The state invested heavily in computing infrastructure and connected schools to the internet based on a simple scientific hypothesis. If you want to build a digital nation, you must first build a human ecosystem capable of absorbing this transformation without structural friction. By the year 2000, the Estonian parliament took an unprecedented logical step by declaring internet access a fundamental human right, right alongside water and electricity. In that very same year, 2000, Estonia launched its electronic tax declaration system, e-tax. Here, utilitarian rationalism revealed its true power: prioritize reducing pain. In a traditional system, a citizen wastes hours, if not days, gathering receipts and standing in line to submit tax returns, an immense psychological and logistical pain.
Under the new digital architecture, tax returns were completed under 5 minutes because the state already held the necessary data, requiring only user verification. The goal was not merely abstract public happiness, but the immediate elimination of wasted human time and capital, redirecting human energy toward productive output instead of bureaucratic paralysis. This formed the foundational block of a society anchored in mathematical precision rather than bureaucratic hierarchy. Chapter 2: X-Road Architecture and Breaking with Paper Bureaucracy. As digitization expanded in the early 2000s, the Estonian state confronted a critical engineering and logical dilemma. How do you connect fragmented public institutions without building a massive centralized database that becomes an easy target for cyber attacks or an instrument for authoritarian control? Had they built a centralized database holding every citizen's secret, they would have committed the argument from authority, naively assuming a centralized state server is infallible simply because it belongs to the government. Instead, scientific reasoning based on critical analysis led them in 2001 to invent the X-Road architecture, or XT. X-Road is not a centralized database, it is a decentralized data exchange layer linking public and private databases seamlessly. Operating via encrypted channels, it allows each database to remain in its original location. The Ministry of Health retains medical records, the police retain civil registries, and banks retain financial records, while enabling these databases to communicate instantaneously with ultra-secure protocols. To complete this architecture, Estonia introduced mandatory digital ID cards, or e-ID, in 2002. Embedded with cryptographic microchips, these cards enabled legally binding digital signatures equivalent to physical handwriting. From X-Road, Estonia introduced its strict logical rule, the once-only principle. This principle represents pure deductive logic applied to statecraft. No government agency is allowed to request information from a citizen if that information is already stored in another database. If the population register knows your address, the Ministry of Education, the tax authority, or a public hospital cannot demand a paper document proving where you live. The system fetches the data automatically through X-Road. What did this logical action yield? It eliminated bureaucratic pain. Today, 99% of public services in Estonia are accessible online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The only exceptions traditionally requiring physical presence were marriage, divorce, and real estate transfers, a deliberate design choice to prevent impulsive emotional decisions during major life events. Independent scientific estimates indicate that X-Road and digital signatures save Estonia 800 years of human working time annually, conserving roughly 2% of its GDP every year, an amount equal to its defense spending required for NATO compliance. In short, digital efficiency literally paid for Estonia's national security.
Chapter 3: Cyber Firestorm and the Birth of Data Embassies. In April 2007, Estonia faced a geopolitical shock that nearly brought the nation to its knees. Following a government decision to relocate a Soviet-era military monument from central Tallinn to a military cemetery, the country came under the first coordinated, state-sponsored, distributed denial-of-service cyber attack in history. Within hours, government portals, banking infrastructure, and news outlets were paralyzed, threatening to push a fully digital society back to the Stone Age. A conventional government response might have fallen for appeal to tradition, declaring that paper records are safer because physical paper cannot be hacked online. But Estonian rationality did not view the attack as proof that digitization had failed. They treated it as a new contextual data point requiring structural adjustment. Engineers concluded that the solution was not to abandon code, but to make the code indestructible.
First, Estonia partnered with tech pioneers to pioneer tamper-proof blockchain technology long before Bitcoin gained mainstream fame. They deployed the keyless signature infrastructure, KSI, developed by the Estonian firm GuardTime, ensuring no medical, legal, or government record could be altered without immediate detection. Second, in 2008, Estonia hosted the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in Tallinn, turning a vulnerability into global strategic authority on cyber defense. Third, and perhaps most brilliant, was the conceptual evolution of survival itself: data embassies. In 2017, Estonia opened the world's first data embassy inside a high-security data center in Luxembourg. This server infrastructure does not fall under Luxembourg's jurisdiction. It enjoys full Estonian diplomatic immunity, holding live, real-time mirrored backups of the nation's core databases. The underlying logic is striking. Even if an invading military force physically occupies Estonian soil and destroys its physical buildings, the state of Estonia remains alive, operational, and accessible from the cloud in Luxembourg. Estonia detached the concept of statehood from physical geography, transforming it into a logical entity immune to physical erasure. This relentless logic expanded further in 2014 with the launch of the e-Residency program. Demographic data showed a small, stagnant population and a limited domestic market. The logical pivot was simple. If we cannot physically bring in millions of people to live in Estonia, why not onboard their business minds digitally? Anyone in Egypt, India, or Brazil can become a digital resident of Estonia, launch a trusted European Union business in minutes, and manage it remotely. This initiative generated significant state revenue while forging a global network of stakeholders whose economic interests depend on Estonia's stability. Chapter 4: Mathematics as Ethics and Politics to Reduce Human Pain. When we place the Estonian experiment on the dissecting table, its success reveals itself not as technology magic, but as a rigorous ethical and rational architecture. Ethics here were not empty political slogans, but a practical process. Gather contextual data, run it through logical evaluation, and check against two criteria. Does this preserve survival, and does it reduce human pain? Traditional bureaucracy across the globe remains a primary source of psychological and temporal pain. Endless lines, physical paperwork, bribery, favoritism, human error, and lost files are manifestations of administrative irrationality. Estonia replaced human discretion in routine transactions with transparent algorithmic processes. An algorithm does not take bribes, does not favor relatives, and does not experience Monday morning mood swings. Through total transparency, every Estonian citizen retains access to a personal access log, showing precisely who looked at their data, when, and for what purpose. If a police officer or physician accesses personal data without legal authorization, the system triggers an automatic flag, prompting immediate prosecution. The digital system transformed from an instrument of state surveillance into a tool for citizens to audit the state. Falling into wishful thinking is what destroys institutions when they assume legacy systems will function forever simply because they worked in the past. Estonia demonstrated that true ethical courage lies in dismantling inefficient systems the moment they fail to deliver measurable results. They did not hesitate to close physical offices, retrain civil servants, and eliminate paper processes because scientific metrics do not tolerate waste. Political decision-making in Estonia was not driven by ideological battles, but by the cold metric of code efficiency and human optimization. Pain reduction manifested in saving millions of hours of waiting, slashing carbon emissions from unnecessary travel, and protecting the economy from systemic corruption that erodes purchasing power. Estonia proved that a state is not a collection of bricks, flags, or emotional speeches. It is an operating system.
If the operating system is slow and riddled with bugs, the entire machinery of society will stall no matter the horsepower under its hood. Conclusion: the code that redefined the meaning of a state. The story of Digital Estonia is not an ode to coding. It is a masterclass in the analytical engineering of survival. When stripped of technological hype, it presents a compelling case of overcoming logical fallacies that claim small or under-resourced nations are doomed to dependency or failure. By using scientific reasoning to evaluate reality and abandoning the sunk costs of the past, Estonia turned its geographic vulnerability into strategic leverage, building an agile, decentralized digital society. Estonia demonstrated that true political ethics are expressed not in verbal promises, but in building systems capable of minimizing daily human friction, protecting human time, and guaranteeing institutional survival under harsh geopolitical conditions. Geography is no longer destiny when rationality and mathematics become the true blueprint for managing resources. What did you gain from the video?